I'm not live? It says I'm live. Yeah. Hello. I'm apparently not live. Tell me if I'm live. I don't know what happened. We had an entire 5-minute countdown with the cats that apparently was not live. Okay, now I'm live. Everybody says it just happened. Well, you didn't see me adjusting my mics, nor did you see Kugel meowing at the door until it was open, but then refusing to come in here. Hello. We are not talking about economics or finance today. What we are talking about is figure skating, and that is because the Olympics start this week, and there will be figure skating from the beginning of the Olympics all the way to the end, because we have this thing called the team event, which we've had since Sochi in 2014, which is kind of an interesting event. We can talk a little bit about that, but I want to focus because I can't possibly give you all my predictions for figure skating, nor do I think it would be that interesting to give it to you in a live stream format for all of my predictions for figure skating in one thing. And I think it would be an awful lot to intake if you're not someone who's been following the sport all at once. But I thought I would prime you for the women's event, which actually is happening the very final week of the Olympics. That being said, you will see women's figure skaters as soon as this Friday, and that is because the team event is starting this week, and we have this like special little team event in figure skating where individual teams and individual skaters from the singles discipline, the ice dance discipline, and the pairs discipline compete as a country group, which is similar to something that gymnastics has in the team event. And we've had it since Sochi in 2014. I think it's meant to make it a little more watchable and easier to cheer on skaters for a general audience at the Olympics. I mean, it also ups the amount of available medals. There are often skaters that might get a team gold medal or a bronze medal that are just not likely to hit the podium in their own individual or team events. So, well, Russia is not really more fully banned than before. So, this is why I want to talk about women's figure skating, because the landscape of women's figure skating, other than pairs, is probably the discipline that has shifted the most with the full and complete banning of Russia since the 2022 Olympics. So there has been consequences for Russia since the widespread doping that was state-sponsored was discovered at the 2014 Sochi Olympics. I highly recommend the movie about the whistleblower for the Sochi Olympics. And if you need something to prime yourself about wondering why Russia was banned even before the invasion of Ukraine, I would highly recommend the Icarus documentary. I believe it's still available on Netflix. I think Icarus is actually a great thing to watch ahead of starting to watch the Olympics. The Olympics are meant to bring joy. They're about peace between nations. They're about celebrating the amazing things the human body can do. But I think it's always good to be reminded about the fact that the Olympics are highly freaking political. And there is nothing that authoritarian leaders love more than, kind of baseless ways to brag about their country. And if you have a command economy, if you have a state-sponsored programs, as is common in authoritarian countries, it can become very easy to find ways to get the medals that you so desire in the name of nationalism, in the name of celebrating your fabled leader. And this is one thing that we have seen with Russia. So I do recommend the Icarus documentary. documentary, no figure skaters were specifically called out as having had been on the list of athletes that essentially had their samples swapped. So according to Grigory Rodchenkov, who was the whistleblower that used to work at the Russian WADA lab, which is the World Anti-Doping Association lab, who is part of the Icarus documentary. I would highly recommend watching it because it does not unfold in the way that you think it's going to unfold. According to him, the method that was used was essentially to split samples from clean and dirty samples. And, they found a way to take the samples from the athletes and pull off the top without very obvious tampering with them. And essentially, it meant that when the athletes, the best athletes that they had, were tested for doping, they would pull their sample, and there's always a B sample. And the idea of the B sample is it helps with false positives. So the A sample, even if it did show positive for doping, then the B sample would be the swapped one. So once the A sample tested positive, then the B sample would actually be from a clean athlete or would be a clean sample, and then the doping case would be thrown out. We do know that one Russian figure skater that competed at the Sochi Olympics has said that her B sample was clean, but she wasn't on the list of athletes. We have never really gotten closer to understanding the truth of doping in Russian figure skating, but the probably worst live television I have ever woken up at 3 a.m. to watch of my own accord was the 2022 Winter Olympics women's free skate. And what had happened between the team event and the free skate was that Kamila Valieva, who was at the time a 15-year-old Russian phenom figure skater who came out of the same camp as she was the favorite for Olympic gold, and her training mates, who all were under the same coach, were the favorites for the silver and the bronze. And she had a positive doping test. There was a lot of specifics about the way that this went down that were specific to the fact that she was 15 years old. And then there was also complications that happened because of COVID, because this was very much still a COVID Olympics, especially because it was in China. So things were extremely strict. But her positive sample was from the Russian Figure Skating Nationals, which happened on Christmas the year before, the Olympics being in February. And Russian Figure Skating Nationals were on Christmas because Christmas is... the December 25th is not Christmas in Russia for most people. And her sample took too long to be returned because of two factors. One, it has to be sent out of the country. And that is because Russia has been in trouble for years since the whistleblowing on their state-sponsored doping that does not allow them to operate their own WADA labs. All of their samples for even their events that are domestic have to be sent to a different WADA lab. So they were sent to a WADA lab out of the country. However, that was right as Europe was being slammed with the Omicron. I believe it was the Omicron variant. It might have been the one before that. I can't keep track of which month of COVID was which variants, but a new variant of Omicron a new variant of COVID had wiped out the lab that the samples were sent to out of the country. If I'm correct, I believe the samples were sent to Finland. They may have been sent to Denmark. Don't quote me on where they were sent. I'm trying to recall this from my brain. I don't have notes in front of me for this. And that it took so long to get back, and it got back after Kamila Valieva had already competed in the team event. And it turned out she had a positive sample. She was under the age of 17, which is the age at which you no longer are considered a, quote, protected person in Olympic rules and under the water rules. So it was very obvious who was subject to the doping allegation, but they actually wouldn't release her name originally. But there was only one athlete that was younger than 17 on the Russian team. And so we kind of knew that. The way that this went down was they went a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of things in the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Are we doing irreparable harm to this athlete if she is contesting this positive doping test? Is it unfair that this doping test took so long to come back? Things are winding through the court. And, this is this young girl's probably final opportunity for the Olympics, given how fast Russia runs through teen girl athletes. And so should we let her compete? Even if it's possible that the results are invalidated if she is found to have been doping, and the court case winds through, which ended up being the end result. What they ended up deciding to do was say, if she is on the podium, then no one gets their podium moment in the women's event at the Olympics. Which was assumed that would end up being what happened, was that she would be on the podium because she was far and away the favorite for winning. She had just won Europeans recently, and she had beat all of her training mates. She'd won Russian nationals, which frankly, in many ways is harder to win than a lot of international competitions are, especially at that time. And so the thought, and her biggest competition were her training mates. All it came out of this same training camp under Eteri Tuperidze. That name will come back. That's a Russian figure skater. So this, Camilla, the pressure got to her. I mean, it was awful what she was put through, the media storm. The eyes of the world are not on figure skating very often. We get 2 weeks every 4 years where anybody gives a crap about the sport. Nobody had heard the name Camilla Vieira until the Olympics NBC puff pieces started coming out in the US, right? Russia follows figure skating. Most of the world outside of figure skaters themselves are not heavy fans of this sport. Gone are the 90s in the US, the days of Michelle Kwan and Christy Yamaguchi, where we had pro-am competitions on television, and it was the most watched sport in the US on primetime TV after NASCAR, or it traded spots with NASCAR on and off. Gone are those days. We are very much a niche sport in the figure skating world outside of Russia, a couple other niche groups that follow it, except during the Winter Olympics. And we are by far the most watched Winter Olympic sport. And that's because you don't have to understand anything about the scoring to enjoy watching figure skating. It is so much more appealing to most people than watching something like luge, which is you can't see the athletes and they're going down in a tube at 80 miles per hour. Very cool, impressive, but luge, it's just not the same as watching someone skate to the Minions soundtrack in a bright yellow costume. You don't have to know anything about the jumps. You don't need to know what a grade of execution is to enjoy watching that. And that is coming up. One of our Spanish figure skaters is skating to Minions, which, by the way, it did not have the music licensing worked out until about 5 hours ago, despite the fact that Universal is an NBC company, and NBC pretty much owns the Olympics. So they were working out the music licensing till the last minute, which is crazy because nobody can redo their program days before the Olympics, the largest event of their life. Kind of wild. But I'm very excited for everybody to find that. And that is one of my predictions for something that is going to go live. Will there be prop betting on the number of falls a skater makes? That's really interesting. I don't know. I don't actually follow betting terribly often. So, you mean a 250-foot arch? You mean putting your name on everything? What a surprise. I don't know what you said I'm shocked about, but let's just say it's probably the whole thing that Russia is doing. So, we're getting back to why figure skating has changed and why Russia is banned. So the combination of this poor 15-year-old girl was doped, which, by the way, an athlete of this age, athletes at this caliber, you are aware of your doping regulations. We even now have evidence after the Court of Arbitration for Sport trial that shows that she was actively asking about like supplements and weight loss supplements, which, oh, these poor girls are so tiny, and finding out if they were on the list or if they had anything. But there's also a team doctor, and the team doctor that treated all of these girls that were the top contenders for the podium and was actually traveling with them at the Olympics, he was already banned from a different sport, rowing, for doping. He also had patents for several things that are not allowed under water regulations. So I'm just going to put it out there. This is a 15-year-old teenager who does need to be aware as a internationally competitive elite athlete of the things put in her body. At the same time, this girl has lived at the rink her entire life. She does whatever her coaches say to do. She has lived and breathed nothing but ice skating, and she has the people that she relies on to give her information about what is and isn't banned are the ones in charge of her. Likely what happened and why she tested positive was the substance that she tested positive for is TMZ, and it is, wait, did I say TMZ? Sorry. Yes, it is TMZ. It's a heart medication, and it is used for training longer. So it is not necessarily something that you would take in competition. And if you know about doping regulations, there are often drugs that are allowed out of competition and in competition now. This has been true since about 2002. And but this drug is banned year round. And it was a replacement for a drug that had only recently become banned, which was meldonium, which does kind of the same thing. It allows you to train for longer periods of time because it's meant to treat angina. It is not the kind of thing that an international elite teenage girl athlete would be taking for medical reasons. It was also not listed on her, use authorization. So one of the things, like, we've seen leaks of these before, and they're likely linked to Russian state-sponsored hacking, but we'll move on, where we've seen some high-profile athletes that do actually have use authorizations for banned substances because they need them for medical reasons. And that requires them to, file and say, like, one of the ones that was leaked was Simone Biles was for a while on Adderall, which would be a banned substance when it's performance enhancing, but she was on it for her ADHD and she had a use authorization. Sometimes athletes can do this if they have an infection and steroids are necessary to control it. They might get a temporary use authorization to allow it, which essentially says this is not being used for performance enhancing reasons. This is being used for medical reasons. She did not have any medical use authorizations for this drug. Camila Villeva did. What likely happened, it was well known that at Russian Nationals, which is the event where she tested positive, pretty much the entire Russian team had COVID. Like, one of them was being given smelling salts by her coach and looked like she was about to pass out before she went and did her program. Like, there was a lot of because they all train and work together, and there was a lot of COVID going around. And so she likely had been sick, which was fairly evident from her practices. She seemed better by actual competing at Russian Nationals. And that likely altered what would be called the taper. So you'll taper drugs when you're trying to get off of them. And you would also do a taper if you were designing a doping regimen where you did not want to have to pop up at competition where you're going to be tested, because the medalists are always tested in WADA competitions. And then there'll be a random sampling of other participants. And then, of course, there is randomized testing that will happen. But it has been long known that there are ways to give heads up to athletes if you, for example, have a state-sponsored doping program, that maybe someone will be coming, right? With corruption, anything is possible. So what likely happened, she was sick, her taper did not work, and it still showed up in her system as trace amounts. What the argument was, as we found out in the Court of Arbitration for Sport documents that were released when her whole case finally went through, was that she tried to claim that her grandfather, who wasn't actually her grandfather, by the way, it was the father of someone her mom used to date, was on this heart medication. That's what they tried to say. And then she had cut a strawberry to put in a pudding on the same cutting board as the heart medication. Then, even better, she then apparently took this thing on a train 8 hours into St. Petersburg to the competition in a fridge, and then she ate this little strawberry dessert over multiple days, which was the only way with the half-life to explain how this drug was still in her system. It is such an implausible story. One, who the hell is this grandfather? The father of her mother's ex. It was whoever the Russian government could get as fast as possible to start doing interviews during the Olympics to be like, I take the heart medication, not Camilla. That was it. It was just, the dude was giving interviews like from his car. He clearly had just been pulled off the street as someone that was now going to be doing this. It was very obvious that the Court of Arbitration for Sport and the final report that came from the World Anti-Doping Agency did not believe this explanation whatsoever. The idea that this athlete ate a strawberry dessert before one of the most important competitions of her career, because it was essentially the qualifier that was going to send her to the Olympics, and that she ate it over multiple days, and she took it in a refrigerated compartment on the train across Russia, and that there was enough of a trace amount to show up in her system days later from the cutting board of cutting the strawberry of someone who apparently is close enough to her to be cutting his medication when there's not a clear familial link. It was very obvious WADA did not believe any of this story, the way that they put quotes around grandfather and strawberry dessert and all of that. So we're getting back to the live event. Why was this the worst live event, a sporting event I've ever seen? I mean, it was truly the worst thing I've ever woken up at 3 a.m. to watch in my life. And the reason was because Camilla was not getting supported. Part of it was that she wasn't able to have her family there because it was a COVID Olympics. There was a lot of, you need to be very careful about who you are taking care of. I will also say she got sent through the mixed zone, which is where press talks to the athletes by herself, and was like pulling her hoodie over her face. I still think it was unreasonable for her coaches to send her through the mixed zone alone. But that became a very iconic image that then she ended up recreating in a program when she was a banned skater. So she lost it in this free skate. Essentially, she was meant to go out there, win, and then we weren't going to get a podium event. But she just gave it up. And she came off the ice, and her coach, Etiria Tupiritsa, who's also the coach of what we assumed would be the silver and the bronze medalist, but what ended up being the gold and the silver medalist, her coach said, "Why did you do that?" in Russian, why did you do that? Camilla was distraught. It looked terrible. It's terrible to watch a 15-year-old have a breakdown on live television. In the kiss and cry, she just was in a terrible state because she did not stand up on a lot of her jumps, and was just an unhappy camper. She was walking away crying, being consoled by random people who spoke Russian. That was the other thing. She does not speak English. She does not speak Chinese. I think she speaks a little better English now, but she pretty much only spoke Russian. And because of that, it was just like she was very isolated there. And the only people she could talk to are the people that probably are the ones that doped her. It's awful. It's awful situation for her. She was getting some counseling. Like, she was chatting with one of the former Olympic silver medalist who is now a commentator for a Russian TV, who was there, who chatted with her, Xenia. So anyway, that happened. Here's the other things that happened at this. The Anna Shcherbakova, who is the reigning Olympic gold medalist, who will not be repeating, put out the performance of a lifetime, and she did it. She came away with the gold medal. Meanwhile, her training partner, Sasha Trusova, who is a jumping machine with pretty much no artistry. I mean, let's just say it. She loves jumping and she loves doing quads, and she doesn't really love performing. So Sasha Trusova, she did it. She stood up. She did all the quads that she said she was going to do, despite the fact that it was probably slightly more than she should have done because it even more chipped away at the performance. And Sasha was not happy about the fact that Anna did a better job than her as far as total score, because she's never really had the component score. She's never really had the performance score because that's not what she likes and likes to focus her energy on. You can't have the complete package at the age of 17. It's just not possible. It takes so long to develop those kind of performance and skating skills, like the physical skating skills, which we call components in figure skating. And if you are learning jumps that nobody else in the world is doing, as Sasha Trusova is doing, then there is not enough time in the day, even if you're taking a heart medication to train longer, in order to train both those things at that highest level. You can have elements of both, but you're not going to have the Jason Brown quality of performance and skating skills at that age, at 17, while Jason Brown didn't even have those quality of performance skills at 17, and certainly not while also landing 5 quads in a program. So Sasha has a breakdown once she finds out that she is getting the silver medal. And this is fairly typical in, Russian culture. It's the gold medal or nothing, right? But her training mate wins, while Sasha is having a full meltdown. She says, everybody got a gold medal but me, because at this point, Camilla had skated in the team event for Team Russia. Well, for the Olympic athletes from Russia, which is what we were calling them at that time because they were in trouble for the doping. They weren't yet in trouble for the war. The war in Crimea had started, but the war in the rest of Ukraine hadn't started yet. It would start a week later, while the Paralympics were still going on. And so they were the Olympic athletes from Russia. They did not get to listen to the Russian national anthem when they were on the podium. They got to listen to Tchaikovsky, which is about as close to the Russian national anthem as you can get anyway. So Team Russia, Olympic athletes from Russia teams, had competed in the team event, and they, Camilla had won presumably a gold medal at that. However, all the medals were on hold because the doping that happened, that Camilla doping thing came out right before they were set to do the podium event. They were set to do the podium. Originally, people thought it was a positive COVID test. It turns out that one of the American skaters did in fact have COVID, and he was out for the men's event, but we'll move on from that. So what happened on live TV? I would play it for you, but NBC owns all the rights and my whole channel. I'm pretty sure my channel will just get shut down if I try to play it for you. Sasha Trusova was sitting there right after having, so let's get back to Anna Shcherbakova is sitting there with Kari Sakamoto, who's a Japanese skater who now has won a bronze medal. And she has won a bronze medal because Camilla biffed it, right? Did not put out the performance of a lifetime. So Kari Sakamoto, who does not speak Russian, and doesn't speak terribly good English, although I think her English has improved over the past couple years, is the only one to congratulate Sasha Trusova, who just won an Olympic gold medal. not Sasha Trusova, sorry. Anna Sherbakova. So that Sasha Trusova wanted to win the Olympic gold medal. So Anna Sherbakova is just sitting there like in her mask, and it looks like she's waiting for the bus. She's in just utter shock. And she's since said that like she was in shock and that's why she like had no reaction. But the reason that no one is congratulating her right after she's won the Olympic gold medal is because Sasha is having a full-on meltdown on live television, as well as Camilla having a full-on meltdown. Camilla just has lost her chance for an Olympic medal, which she eventually will also lose all of her previous medals that have happened since her positive test and have a 4-year ban, including Russia losing their medal. They also lost the gold spot that they had in the team event as a result of this. And, you know, Sasha is saying things like, everybody has a gold medal but me. You've always known. Full-on meltdown on live TV. She was also refusing to go onto the ice for the podium because they ended up having the podium event because Camilla didn't get a ticket or didn't get a medal, so they could go ahead with the podium event. Whether or not that's fair, given that all her other training mates were likely also being doped as they're all in the same training camp. You know, eventually she did go on. She's just streaks of mascara like coming down her face. Sasha still looks like, or I don't know why I keep calling her Sasha. Anna still just looks like she's waiting for the bus, having just won the biggest thing ever in figure skating. And Kaori is the only one trying to say anything to Anna, who just won the Olympic gold medal. Like, Kaori is trying to, like, comfort her when they had this language barrier. So that was what happened last time. Now, how are we feeling? This is an info dump. I know so very little about ice skating, but Lily info dumping about it is terrific. Okay, well, this is great. I would love to see someone test how much of the medicine would have to be on the cutting board to still show up. That was what was also crazy, is that it had to be cut from her home, and then taken to St. Petersburg. It's just totally wild. Is my arthritis drug banned? One of my arthritis drugs is banned, the other one is not. I am not currently an elite athlete, so I do not have to worry about WADA testing. There's always a chance. I could be the next Deanna Stellato Dudek, which we could also talk about that because I'm really upset and I really hope that her injury gets better because we're about to see a 42-year-old hopefully compete at the Olympics after 17 years off and have a possibility at winning an Olympic medal. However, she just sustained an injury in practice and she's not even on the ground in Milan yet, and they had to pull her out of the team event, which is just such a boring part of it. Okay. So where are we at? What happens from this? Well, there was a couple things that were, there is nothing good about the war in Ukraine. And I don't think there's anything good about doping teenage girls. I'm just going to put that out there. I don't think either of those are controversial opinions. I think we can agree that teen girls being held to underweight body standards and having banned substances put in them without being able to fully consent to this process is terrible. I think we can also all agree that invading a sovereign nation, not great. Not a huge fan of that. And the reason I have a feeling most of us can agree is because, one, I have set this to subscribers only mode for the chat, so hopefully we will not get bombed by Russian bots, which often happens when I talk about figure skating. I made a point to leave out any of the Russian figure skaters' names from the title. Okay, but the other reason is because the International Skating Union, after Russia invaded Ukraine, which happened during the Paralympics, like the Olympics was done, but the Paralympics were not even done. And one of the reasons I remember that was because one of the Ukrainian Paralympians refused to get on the podium with a Russian athlete. So they did this. Camilla is held up as this absolute hero back in Russia. She gets to meet with Putin. Her face is put on giant posters. They make her own gold medal to give her. They hold her up as a martyr. She was a martyr because of Western bias against Russian athletes, and what was done to her was horrible. I do agree that what was done to her was horrible, but I don't think it was necessarily about the holding accountable positive doping tests. I think what is horrific, and I still feel this way, was that there was never any consequences for any of her entourage. Not only are they still coaching, many of them will be at the Olympics because we've seen so many athletes in Russia switch to other countries. They're competing for Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Russia, or Georgia, Finland. What other countries are we seeing the Russians compete for? Any skater that has even the lightest amount of ability to compete for another country that has a Russian citizenship did their damnedest to move countries. And so Eteri Tuperitsa, who is the coach that was very good at churning out these top Russian Olympic figure skaters, she is coaching other athletes that are competing for other countries, and she will be at the Olympics. So just going to remind you, no consequences. No consequences for the team doctor who gave Camilla the vitamins that are likely what actually caused her positive doping test. Camilla got banned for 4 years from the sport, which also meant that she could not even train on ice that was affiliated with official training facilities. But because all of the top training facilities are state-sponsored in Russia, it effectively meant that she couldn't do much. That being said, the Russian government took care of her. They gave her the opportunity to do a lot of things. She got a stipend. She got health insurance for her family. She got her dumb special Putin medal. And the 4-year ban was a little less biting because all Russian athletes were banned for 4 years. But the typical trajectory of these Russian athletes since the rise of Sambo 70 and the Eteri Tuperitsa method was that these girls would go, they would essentially have maybe 2 years on the international scene. They would do maybe 1 year in juniors and then 2 years in the top senior levels. They would win an Olympic medal and then they would retire. And, you know, the Xenia, who is is Olympic silver medalist, she wanted to keep competing after 17, and Eteri told her to just go get married and have babies. The training methods that Eteri uses that kind of created this quad renaissance in women's skating, which was girls skating at this point, really relied on very thin, very underweight. Like they got weighed like twice a day, I believe, in this training camp. I think they still do. And a certain type of rotation method that was very, very hard on the lower backs that involved a lot of free rotation. And essentially, when a lot of these girls got secondary sex characteristics, which many were kind of putting off puberty by being underfed, you know, the reigning Olympic gold medalist, Sherbakova, said that she weighed 80 pounds at the Olympics. And Eteri Tuperitsa, their coach, is hosting a reality weight loss show on Russian television, in addition to coaching several, now, again, Olympic athletes. Her daughter also will be competing at the Olympics for Georgia. Just want to say that. Her daughter is also an American. Eteri is weirdly a victim of the Oklahoma City bombing. She was here in I believe the YMCA while she was in the U.S. for, I believe, skating-related reasons during the Oklahoma City bombing. So Eteri Tuperitsa's name is actually on the side of that. Anyway, her daughter was born in the U.S. And therefore has American citizenship, but is not competing for America, is competing for Georgia because she's an ice dancer and her partner is, I believe, Georgian, or at the very least, someone has figured out how to get them Georgian citizenship. So which is common in ice dance. There's a lot of citizenship swapping. So where are we at with this? Russia has been banned, and then they just kind of made their own. They just started having even more and more competitions, and they were rolling out all the stops for the domestic competitions because that's what you do when you've been persecuted for invading a foreign country. Just what happened, but persecution is how it is framed in the Russian media. And I mean, these were like Golden Globes level productions at Russian domestic competitions. But that also means that all of these top athletes that are coming up now, they have such a short window within the Russian women's skating because of the training methods that have kind of happened in the camps. And because of that, we've seen a lot of these girls kind of come up on the Russian scene and already retire in this quad, like since the last Olympics, because of how short that kind of lifespan is. We are also seeing like Sasha Trusova. She just had a kid and then she was already jumping triples like 2 weeks after her C-section. And she now is getting back her quads and says she's returning to competition. Igatov, I believe, is her new last name. I actually don't fully remember her new last name because she has her married husband's last name, but it's Russian, so she has both last names still. But her YouTube channel is Mr. and Mrs. Igatova. Anyway, she says she's coming back to competition. I'll kind of believe it when I see it. Xenia, the one that I referred to that was the Olympic silver medalist from prior to this, she wanted to keep training. Terry was like, you're too old, just go retire. You know, once you've won an Olympic medal, you get a lot of support within the Russian government. You can kind of go to any of the best schools. There is a specific school that a lot of people in Russia go to become elite coaches. It's like a school of physical education that's like the Harvard in Russia of athletes. And you can get, a good paying government job for the rest of your life, such as the life in an oligarchy. And there was kind of a thought like you should just do that. But Camilla says she's coming back because her 4-year ban is now over. It ended on December 25th because it was backdated 4 years. So it was backdated and she lost all of her titles that she had kind of accrued in that time, which was her Russian national title, which is where she got the positive test, and Europeans. And I don't think anything else. And then she couldn't compete at Worlds that year because the doping test had already happened. Because Worlds happens after the Olympics in figure skating. It's a little confusing. So what happened to what happened to figure skating in the world when Russia got banned? Well, Russia got banned by the International Skating Union, as was done with a lot of other sports where it was a statement about that. One thing I will say is that there has been a lot of confusing conflating of Russia's ban with the doping, which they had been punished at the Olympics for many years, right? Like we said, they're technically Olympic athletes from Russia. They weren't Team Russia. They were Team Olympic athletes from Russia. And they had to listen to Tchaikovsky instead of the Russian national anthem. So now they've taken an even more step further. In figure skating, they produced a list of eligible athletes for this Olympics. And the athletes are no longer competing as Olympic athletes for Russia. They are competing as Russian athletes that are individual neutral athletes, which individual neutral athletes is a term that has been made up explicitly for this, but it's a very similar status to like the refugee teams, where it's essentially teams for people that are stateless, like people that are not going to be competing for a national team. But to become eligible for this, each sport had a list of athletes that were eligible to even like compete to be considered this, and they had to do applying. And it was also true of coaches. So, but the ISU, the International Skating Union, which is our governing body worldwide for figure skating, made a list of athletes in Russia that were like eligible for this. But it was like, you had to show that you essentially had not been actively supporting the war effort, which was functionally really hard for a lot of these state-sponsored athletes that had only been in state competitions where they were being invited to go meet with Putin, which is also like very complicated because he's like super COVID conscious and you have to like quarantine for like 3 weeks before you meet Putin. You like it was very hard. They scrubbed all social media about, you know, kind of what the athletes were taking. Obviously, no longer does social media technically work in Russia because all those apps have been turned off in Russia. So most people use Telegram now as social media in Russia. And so there was a lot of scrubbing through people's Telegram posts to kind of see, but a lot of these athletes are in a really tough place because their paycheck and all their training expenses is covered for by the Russian state. But by the same token, if they said anything that was supportive of the war, they would not be eligible for this neutral athletes kind of statement if they supported the war in any way. But if they said anything against the war, they could possibly lose their state funding. They could put their families at risk. They could put their housing and their training at risk. Like a lot of them are in a really, really tough position politically. And then in the combination of that, there is also the doping, which the state-sponsored doping at the Olympics Russia has been on the shit list since it was whistleblown on them for doing this. And that's prior to the invasion of Ukraine. That was what all of these athletes was about there. So when they pulled this up, there was very few people in Russian figure skating that even qualified for this. And you would be like, how would like a 15-year-old girl not qualify for this? Well, like they're so young. Here's the thing. All of the top elite skating schools, there's really only two that anybody really speaks of. One is run by Evgeny Plushenko, and then one is run by Eteri Tuperitsa. They obviously have like large kind of camps around them, but those are the two main ones that anybody kind of talks about. Plushenko's is called Angels of Plushenko, and Tuperitsa's is called Sambo 70. And there was like 3 or 4 athletes total in women's that were like eligible, and then it ended up being 1. Here is the other complicated part. The number of spots that a country is eligible for in figure skating at the Olympics is dependent on your world's ranking at the previous worlds. So the previous year worlds, and you're not earning them for yourself. So, you know, what we've seen yet again this year is that sometimes athletes, they place high enough and they earn 2 spots or 3 spots or 1 spot for their country, but then someone else ends up being put on the Olympic team because those are independent situations. How many spots a country gets is determined by the International Skating Union and the IOC rules, and who is put on the team is determined by the country's Olympic Organizing Committee. In some countries, there is one athlete who's won that spot who's also a shoo-in for it because no one else is eligible because the individual athletes might not have enough international points. But in a country with an amazing depth of field, for example, the United States right now, we have a phenomenal men's and women's field right now, which is wild. And we have 3 spots for both men and women's, which is the max number of spots that you can get. And those spots were earned at the previous year's Worlds. For men's, it was earned by Ilya Malinin, who is the current reigning world champion and has been undefeated for years in figure skating because he does jumps that people thought were physically impossible, and Jason Brown, who's much beloved and but does not do quads, but has the skating skills of a god. And Jason Brown was not for the first time in his life actually left off the Olympic team after a pretty shit nationals this year, even though he had earned the 3 spots for the US based on him and Ilya's combined placement at the last Worlds. So he's not going to the Olympics. which would have been his last Olympics. Real bummer. It's real bummer, but I'm very happy with the team that we're sending. I'm a little nervous about Torgashev because he doesn't do well internationals. Getting away from the women's figure skating here. We're not going to go into the men's. More than that. So, but then you take like a country like Spain. So Olivia Smart and Tim Deek are British and German, but compete for Spain. We're just going to gloss over that, but we're just going to say they compete for Spain. Spain does not have the depth of field. They are like five-time. I think they're 5-time Spanish national champions. And they also are the only team that won that spot for ice dancing for the Olympics. So there was no question that they were going to be sent. When all of the athletes from your country are banned at the previous year's Worlds, you cannot earn spots for your country at that Worlds. So there's one last shot. If you haven't done it at the previous year's Worlds in figure skating, there is this event that happens late summer, early fall, which this year was called, everybody was calling Chinese Nebelhorn, which is a very skating specific term, but I think it was technically called Road to Beijing, Road to Milan. Yeah, Road to Beijing was a different one. It was in Beijing. So it was in the previous Olympic kind of venue, but it was Road to Milan. And it was the final chance to earn spots for your country. So if your World's placement was high enough to get you one spot, but you not high enough to get you the second spot, you would have an ability to compete for the second or the third spot. But you had to send a different athlete to this event to compete for the additional spot than the one who originally earned it, if that makes sense. So there's this kind of final last hurrah competition. And this is also where smaller countries that have skaters that would be eligible for the Olympics, but for whatever reason didn't do as well at Worlds, maybe didn't go to Worlds, whatever it might be, the previous year, you would send them to compete. So a great example of this, who will be a fan favorite again at the Olympics, I hope, is Donovan Carrillo. He did not, he skates for Mexico. He was a breakout viral sensation in the last Olympics because he has just incredible charisma. And he was, I think, Mexico's first Winter Olympic athlete in a bazillion years. He is Donovan Carrillo did not get the placement at Worlds, but he went and he competed for Mexico and he earned that spot at the Chinese Nebelhorn event, the Road to Milan event that happened this past time. Because Russia was not eligible at the last Worlds, and they're not officially a team. They are neutral athletes, theoretically, that just happen to qualify because they're not associated with the war in Ukraine, and they can't be associated with a camp that does doping. And their coaches had to apply too. So what happened was that essentially, Etera Tupiritsa does not qualify because of her affiliation with Kamila Valieva, but that didn't apply to her for coaching athletes from other countries. So Eteri was at the Road to Milan event because she was there with athletes from other countries that she represents, even though they all train in Russia. But at the very last minute, Adelia Petrosyan, who is the Russian national champion, who's 18, and we'll get back to that age here in a second. She went and competed at the Skate to Milan, the Road to Milan. I think it was Skate to Milan was technically the title, event. And she earned her spot. She was the only women's figure skating athlete that was eligible. At the very last minute, her coach, Danielle, he was not eligible to come because it turns out that they had found I believe it was because they found a social media post where he supported the war at some point, very early in the war, where he was at a very public rally. And so his got pulled. So she actually was there with no coach. She is 18. Why is this age important? Well, one, because of the mess that was Camilla being a protected person and how complicated it got with the Court of Arbitration for Sport and all of their decisions around the last Olympics, they raised the age, and they raised the age to 17. This is a huge problem for the method of Russian coaching, where a lot of these girls cannot even turn their back anymore by the time they're 18 because of the particular way that they do the takeoffs for jumps. So what ended up happening with this? Well, guess what? The Adelia got her spot. She's 18. I will say she is now having trouble keeping up with the quadruple jump. She was the first woman to land a quadruple loop. It is not valid necessarily because it was only done at domestic competition. So she's like in the record books, but with a star next to it, because you usually have to do it at an international competition for it to count. But it was only at domestic competitions because she was not eligible for international competitions. If she put a lights out performance like she was putting out maybe 2 years ago, she could be an Olympic medalist. I think there's two problems with this. One, she just won Russian nationals, and it's very controversial that she won Russian nationals. And I think what was happening was that there was a little bit of home cooking there, and they were trying to give her the momentum because she's the only one eligible to go to the Olympics as this individual neutral athlete. And I think they were trying to make sure she had a gold medal, like a championship going into this. However, the Russian press and even the Skating Federation is kind of like tearing her apart right now because they're saying the second place medalist should have won. So I think that could end up being very psychologically damaging for an athlete who doesn't have her main coaches around her at the Olympics, which is an experience, according to every athlete I know that has been there, it is very, very different. Even if you are extremely used to international competitions, the Olympics is something very different and very special. And it is a high pressure cooker environment, especially for figure skaters that normally get no freaking notice in our sport. And then all of a sudden the eyes of the world and your country are on you. And so this 18-year-old will not have the same level of coaching support, although Terry will be there coaching other folks. But she won't officially be her coach. So like she, I think, will not be allowed in the kiss and cry. Unclear how true that is. Additionally, there's a ton of pressure on her because she's the only chance for Russia to essentially earn the medal in this discipline they have dominated up until they got banned. It has been 20 years since the United States has won an individual medal in women's figure skating. And that largely had to do with the rise of the Russian bloc. Maybe a little off to use the term Russian bloc there, but it's true. As we started to see these like, I have little sympathy for the Russian skaters. Unless the Russian coaches are non-parallel, it's easy to defect and skate for another country. If you're nationalistic, then the chips fall. Well, okay, I won't say that. It is not easy to defect. It is really hard to defect if you are a teenager and you only speak Russian and you have a Russian passport. I would say it would be very challenging to defect. Also note that these are not athletes that yet have international acclaim, right? So if you're saying that they need to defect. The other problem is that the Russian Skating Federation is on the shit list with the International Skating Union, and to switch countries, to switch sports citizenship, the federations have to work together. And right now, the Russian Federation is essentially like the other federations are non-compliant with it. So it's really hard to switch. Additionally, very few of these Russian athletes are able to, they wouldn't be eligible necessarily for other countries, right? The other country has to be willing to have these athletes come and train there. And then there's the final bit of that, which is that if you want to be eligible for the Olympics, you have to be going to a country that is likely to give you a passport. There are very few right now that are eager to give passports to just random Russian girls that might be rising up in the sport. I would say defecting is extremely hard if you are a 14-year-old. I'm just going to say that, like that is really challenging. And it's also really challenging if you only speak Russian, you have been in state-sponsored institutions your entire life, and you're only getting a diet of Russian media because the other media is banned. And you're like very focused on something that's very hard that requires many hours a day, right? Like there is not great discourse about what is happening in Russia, especially for someone with the media literacy of a hyper-fixated 14-year-old, 15-year-old kid. Additionally, it's not that easy to defect. It's really hard to defect when you do not have international acclaim because you are banned from international competitions. Two, there are plenty of non-Russian athletes that do, in fact, train in Russia because of how good Russia's training facilities are. There are quite a few athletes that are competing for other countries that are still training in St. Petersburg. But the challenges of being able to do that are also hard because travel in and out of Russia to international competitions, visas have always been hard for these Russian athletes, but they are infinitely harder now. So even if you have sports citizenship assigned to another country, if you have a Russian passport, it can make it really, really challenging to travel kind of in and out or to train elsewhere because a lot of the other countries will not even give you a work visa, even if your sports citizenship is swapped. So yes, taking a principled stand against the war in Ukraine, I think is very easy to do if you're not someone that is at risk of putting your family in danger, if you're not at risk of losing your home, of losing your ability to feed your family, especially if you're not a teenager. But to take the stance on the idea that these athletes, these children, I mean, most of them are children or they are very young adults, are in the situation of like, it's an easy choice to make. And they have all the information that you have available. It's just not the same. They do not have the same level of information that you do have about what is happening in Ukraine. And that doesn't mean that they can't try to find it, but they do not have access to the same level of information. There's a lot of censorship going on there. And there is also very little information available in a way that is going to be accessible to a kid that is in this kind of training environment where they're training 12 to 14 hours a day, right? They're doping to be able to do that. Two, taking this kind of principled stand is very, very dangerous to your family. And it's one thing to do it if you are internationally recognized and known and you are going to have the backup. It is much harder to do that kind of defection if you do not know what is coming at the other end. So, I mean, even a ton of US figure skating is built on the backs of amazing Russian and Soviet defectors. We had a lot of USSR defectors who came and built the figure skating programs in the United States. Like everyone has a Russian or Ukrainian coach. Of the 3 men the United States are sending to the Olympics, all 3 of them are Russian ethnicity. And all 3 of them have 2 Soviet defector figure skaters as parents. I just want to say, this is, there is, the defection happens. All of those people defected out of the USSR or out of Russia after they had achieved international acclaim. And it just isn't that simple for these kids. And I just want to put that out there. Never heard the term sports citizenship before. Sports citizenship is not the same as actual citizenship. A great example of this is our United States pairs champion, Alyssa Efimova, who was literally, the press conference got moved by 7 hours because till the last minute, they were trying to secure her US citizenship. She has skated for 3 countries. She has skated for Finland, she has skated for Russia, she skated for Germany. And now she skates for the United States. She has citizenship for, I believe, Finland and Russia. She is Finnish by birth. However, her parents are Russian because her mother was a Russian figure skating coach who came over to Finland to train people, which is common, like I mentioned. Just go to New Jersey and every rink there is full of Russian figure skating coaches. I mean, go to any rink. Look up the names of any United States figure skater and look at their coach list, and it's nothing but Russian names. So Alyssa Efimova, she it has a sports citizenship with the United States. She's been released by the German Federation and then previously the Finnish and the Russian federations because she competed internationally. There are so few partners at the elite level in pairs and ice dance that also might be able to work with you. The chances that you both have the same citizenship, very low. So what happens is you have to be released by your previous country's federation, and the federations work together to kind of do this. Often they will require you have a period of non-eligibility where you're not competing for either country, and you have to wait that out before you're allowed to switch sports citizenship. Your sports citizenship is not the same as the country's citizenship. That is which federation is kind of backing you. And so it is usually easier to switch sports citizenship than it is to switch your actual nationality and get the second passport. The rule is that you have to have a passport in hand for the country that you're going to compete for by the time that your Olympic selection committee meets. And Alyssa Efimova, who's our 2-time gold medalist in pairs in figure skating and our best hope for a shot at the podium in pairs, unlikely, but our best shot, she, who is skating with, by the way, someone who's also the son of a Russian figure skater, they had applied for accelerated citizenship for her. She is married to her partner now, to Misha. But they did not have the normal residency period. She'd only been a resident in the United States for 2.5 years. And so they had applied. They actually had hired a lobbyist about 6 months ago. And up till the last minute, I heard, I even as a reporter, I reached out to Senators Elizabeth Warren and Senator Ted Cruz because they all offices were working on this citizenship, but they didn't manage to push it through as quickly. And whether or not you want to say like it's reasonable that athletes often get fast tracked for citizenship, it sucks, but it's like in a lot of countries, that's the way it works. And so, yes, those are, and of our podium at U.S. Nationals, 2 of the teams on the Paris podium were not eligible for citizenship reasons. One of the teams that will be competing in ice dance, Carrera and Pomeranenko. Carrera has lived in the U.S. for a very long time, but she's a Canadian citizen. She was working on her citizenship, and she was living in Michigan because it required that she had residency in the U.S., but all the best ice dance academies are in Canada. Like almost all the best ice dance teams in the world, like the top 20 ice dance teams in the world, all train at this one academy in Montreal, called Ice Academy in Montreal. They opened up a satellite that was closer to Michigan, a satellite camp that Scott Virtue is teaching at. Scott is teaching at, and Tessa Virtue, sorry, I condensed their names. They are heavily shipped together, so you often see their names together, but they're married to separate people. Anyway, she was commuting over the border every day because it required that she be a resident. She could not live in Canada while she was waiting out her U.S. citizenship. She has been waiting on her U.S. citizenship, I think, for 9 or 10 years and been competing for the United States the entire time. And she said that the border, she had to do it every single day, back and forth. She said that all of the people at the U.S. border at the checkpoint had become fans of their skating and cheered her on. So Germany actually has sports visas on their main immigration website. Yes, one of my favorite German citizenship stories that's not related to U.S. figures, not related to figure skating at all, is a vault specialist. And hold on, her name is escaping me right now. I'll bring it back in a second. I have to pull her name. Oh. No, okay, her name is escaping me right now. It'll come back in a second. Essentially, it was an athlete who competed for the USSR. Then she competed for the unified team after the USSR dissolved in vault. And then her son had a very serious illness, And she went to Germany, and Germany like paid for all his surgery and everything. And as a thank you to the German government for doing that, she competed at the Olympics for Germany. And and she would come back to the Olympics. I think she's competed for 4 countries now at the Olympics, 5 countries now at the Olympics, if you count the unified team after the USR dissolved. She competed at all the Olympics. She won a medal for Germany. Then, when Uzbek was its own sovereign state, she's Uzbekistani, she decided that she would go and try to win an Olympic medal for Uzbekistan. So then she did 2 Olympics for Uzbekistan as a vaulter. I just think this is wild. I also think the idea of being like, I owe so much to this country for saving my son's life that I am going to go win them an Olympic medal is kind of wild. Katerina Witt is not who I'm talking about, but this is in vault. Oksana Chusovitina is the Uzbekistani vaulter that I'm talking about. Katerina Witt, I will like to say, she's not very happy with the GDR when it comes to the way that the East German team treated her, but she, yes, got a lot of rights. But yes, that's a great example. Katerina Witt was given all sorts of rights and privileges as an elite figure skater in East Germany, and nobody was kind of necessarily asking her to defect. So when I grew up in Buffalo, I knew people who commuted to Canada daily for work, and I took after-school advanced math, and some of those kids came into Canada twice a week for that program. I mean, it was crazy. She was commuting 4 hours a day. Just totally nuts. All this drama reminds me of Nancy Kerrigan, and Tanya Harding. Tanya Harding, she's a hometown girl. She's from, I still see her at the ice rink sometimes. Okay. We have like only a couple minutes left because I have to eat 2 donuts, y'all. I haven't even introduced the donuts. Now, I want to tell you who I am cheering for at this Olympics and why figure skating has changed so much. So we do still have, when it comes to women's figure skating, we do still have Petrosian Adelaide, who is the neutral athlete who did earn her spot at the Skate to Milano. She is 18, like I said. I think international competitions, let alone the Olympics, are totally different. And she has never really competed internationally except at that Skate to Milan event, which she did win, which isn't a very good test because the top athletes in the world didn't have to go to that event. That was only for people that were competing to be eligible for extra spots for their country or for a spot for their country because they didn't place at the top at Worlds. So that wasn't a good test at international competition. She has only ever done things domestically. She won't have the same support system around her. She won't have very many other athletes. There's one other athlete that will be competing for Russia there on the men's side that, I don't think she even really knows him. So she won't have the same support system. She's in this high pressure cooker environment. And I will say the Russian media is quite unforgiving if they do not like what a figure skater, especially a teen girl, has done for their country. So I'm very worried about that situation. Why is figure skating so much better now? Well, Kari Sakamoto, that Olympic bronze medalist, the Japanese one, I said that was the only one to comfort the Olympic gold medalist because her coaches were busy consoling the other 2 teammates, one of which was having a meltdown because she got a silver medal. Well, Kari Sakamoto stayed in the game, and she was world champion multiple years in a row. She had a stretch of being undefeated. She's done extremely well in international competition. And she essentially is planning to retire after this season, but she's giving it a go for one last Olympic season, and she is a podium favorite and possibly even an Olympic gold medalist favorite. She has the skating skills of a god, but she does not do a quad and she doesn't do a triple axel. Why is there a possibility that the United States could end our 20-year drought? Well, we have at least one skater who can do a triple axel. And the triple axel is worth a lot more points than other triple jumps because it's 3.5 revolutions. So I kind of consider it like the beginning of the quads. Let's just say that. We have only had 2 women skaters do it at the Olympics since Tanya Harding, who was the first American skater to ever do it at the Olympics. And so that gives you, and Tanya Harding was a while ago now, so that gives you a scale of how hard this triple axel is to do. Amber Glenn, our queer 3-time U.S. national champion, who's 26 years old, which is very notable. She is not a 15-year-old. She is a huge advocate for like mental health in the sport, but she has this huge mama bear energy. One, I will say in all the press conferences, she's also constantly trying to get her younger teammates back on track. But Amber Glenn is, Olympic medalist, Grand Prix finalist, medalist. She went the first half of last season, like completely undefeated. Our Grand Prix, which is kind of like in many ways, it can be harder to be a Grand Prix finalist than it can be to be world champion. I can't get into that too much because you'd have to know all the rules of the Grand Prix. But Amber Glenn does a beautiful triple axel, and sometimes she even does 2 in a program, in her free program. She has incredible material this year, and this is what I want you to know about Amber Glenn to look for at the Olympics. Her short program, which I believe she's going to be doing at the team event, but it's a little unclear to me if that's happening or not. She does Madonna's like a prayer. It's so good. It's her costume, incredible. Lisa McKinnon, just amazingness. I predict that program will go viral, and I highly recommend watching Amber Glenn's short program to Madonna. Amazing. Her long program is great, but she's recycling it from last season. That happens a lot in Olympic years because there's a ton of eyes on the sport that haven't seen last year's. And she was doing a lot of touring this summer. And so she said, I essentially just didn't have time to put together an additional long program and a short program. Another skater that has a recycled long program, but that was amazing. She's skating to Donner Summer, and her long program is our world champion, Alyssa Liu. Alyssa Liu, you will be able to spot because the girl has striped hair. She looks like a raccoon, and she would agree that that's her goal. It's actually more like a tree because she does one bleach stripe of a halo every year. She has 3 rings in it now. Also, she's so unhinged that between the short program and the long program, she spent 6 hours getting her hair toned. Alyssa Liu is very interesting because she was national champion when she was only 13 years old in the US. She had quads and a triple axel when she was younger, and she retired after the last Olympics. She was a breath of fresh air on Instagram during the last Olympics because she was just vibing at the Olympics. She was just enjoying her Olympic experience after all of the mess that was women's skating. And she was having a great time. And then she retired as a teenager at the last Olympics. And 2 years off the ice, she came back, and the same season she became back, she was world champion, which is unheard of. She no longer does the quads or the triple axel, but she has the triple axel back, she said, but she didn't do it at nationals, which was her last big competition ahead of the Olympics. I'm assuming she's training it and she might try to put it in, but it is a bit risky to do the triple axel if she doesn't have it consistently landed. It'd be better to put out a program that she can confidently know that she can land all the jumps. She has just a bubbly skating style. She says the most unhinged stuff. So she's got this weird raccoon hair, like total alt girl style. And she has a smiley piercing and tooth gems. None of these things are normal in figure skating, I have to say. And also she announced her comeback with a video that had a seizure warning on it on her Instagram. She is just aggressively Gen Z, I have to say that. And she's 20 now. Isabeau Levito, world silver medalist not this past season, but the one before that. Isabeau, effervescent, little 18-year-old. She is the closest to what I think a lot of people think of when they think of like ice princess and figure skater. She is absolutely just like a little ballerina on ice. She does not have a triple axel or a quad, but she has great skating skills. I don't love the way she jumps, which is true of a lot of people, but she's very consistent. She is a consistency queen. All three of these American women have a shot at the podium, if not the gold. Adelaide, it's a little, we just don't know what she's going to bring because she's been very inconsistent at her Russian domestic competitions, and she's untested on the international stage except for that Beijing qualifier event. Kaori, very likely in the mix for the podium. And we have two other skaters I would say are in the mix for the podium. Luna Hendricks, she's a Belgian skater. She will take you to the club. Her costumes usually have as little fabric is allowed legally on them, and she does phenomenal. Like, you feel like you are Eurotrash and you are headed out to the club in Berlin at 2 a.m. I love her program. She's a very solid skater. She does not have a triple axel or a quad. However, Luna is a phenomenal skater. The only thing was that she was injured last season and went through some surgery, and she is back, but she's not back in like her peak form that was a couple years ago. Luna's definitely in the mix. And I would say those are probably like our favorite skaters. I'm definitely missing some. So why is things so different? Well, here's what I have to say. Everybody likes each other. Like, that's what's changed. They're all so supportive of each other. It's no longer teen girls with the age raising and the banning of the Russians. And there's, like I mentioned, there's only one teen on the US team and for women's, and it's headed up by Amber, who very much considers herself like the grandmother of women's skating, which is laughable at 26, but she's been a competitive figure skater for like 13 years and at like the elite level. And she is like making sure that everybody has a positive experience. She's doing a great job of like trying not to reinforce a lot of the negative things. She speaks with the wisdom of someone who has already retired from the sport and has perspective on it. But I think it's just because she struggled with consistency for a really long time. She's had issues with eating disorders and mental health, depression in the past. And she's been such a good advocate for the sport. And she has really made it so that that taboo and that shame that it really very much exists about talking about those things in this sport, she has pushed through them, in addition to being openly queer. So I'm a big fan of that as a thing. My partner is excited about what a nerd Amber Glenn is. She's delightful. Oh yeah, I saw you mention that she was talking about something. I like how Lily said it was time for a donut and then continued talking for 5 minutes. I have 4 minutes till my next meeting. We have to eat these donuts, y'all. Okay, donut time. I have 2 donuts. Okay, this one is a fritter. It's a cherry fritter, and it's got like a cream overlay on it, I think. Is that what it has on it? Fresh strawberries inside, and then it's not cherries, it's strawberries, and then it has a cream glaze, and it is fritter, and it's huge. Aaron needs his dough donuts. Do we think she eats 2 donuts in 4 minutes? I'm going to eat part of this donut. This might be a very high tax rate. It's because I'm behind on my taxes. They are not double helix earrings that I'm wearing, but I do have some double helix earrings. Maybe. It's very creamy. I want more strawberries, so I'm going to try to get this like full strawberry bite. I'm trying to figure out my rating. I'm still thinking about figure skating so much. Folks, let me know, at Patreons especially, people that are part of the Personal Finance Society, do you think it would be fun to do a co-watch live stream for some of the Olympics events? I think it would be kind of fun. You have to have Peacock, though. But if we do them on Patreon, maybe I could stream them. If we do it behind the paywall? 4 out of 5. That's my take. It's good.
What is it?
It's strawberry and cream. Yeah, I'm saying 4 out of 5. That's my... And we have a second donut. Is there any event that people are like particularly excited about? And follow-up question, would you want to do it when it is airing primetime in the US, or would you want to do it live? I think if we do it on Patreon, we might be able to do the copyrighted stuff. We can't do that on YouTube, but we might be able to do it on Patreon. Okay, I say 4 out of 5. Is that what you say?
Possibly 4.5.
Aaron says possibly 4.5. Okay. And then this second one. Oh, is the tax going away? I want Lillian commentary. I am interviewing reigning Olympic gold medalist at 5 a.m. tomorrow. About a story I'm doing. This one is lavender chip. So it's lavender glaze and mini chocolate chips. And it's just like a regular raised donut underneath. It's got a very nice purple color to it. I assume live will be when I have to sleep. No, it's at like 10:30 a.m. So when most people have to work, our time. So that would be 1:30 in the afternoon Eastern. Stay out of the wandering eye of the authority. Do it Patreon style. Well, I was also kind of wondering if I could like do commentary, but then we could all just try to sync up to watch. That I could do that, right? Oh, I finally got some lavender there. I like that the chocolate chips are mini because it's not too much chocolate for me and it goes well with the lavender, but I don't think it's that important. It's just not a great flavor. It's like it's a fine donut. It's fine. I'm giving it 3.5, or I'm giving it 3. No, I'm 3.5. I'm upgrading, 3.5. Y'all, I am officially 1 minute away from having to be in my union meeting. So speed, tell me what you're looking forward to this week. I'm sorry that I talked for so long. I was so excited to talk about how things have changed. But my faves, Kaori Sakamoto, Amber Glenn, and Alyssa Liu. I like the smell of lavender, but not for food. Too much memory of candle and soap. Yeah, that's kind of the vibe it has. Did you finish that donut?
Agreed with your rating.
3.5? Yeah. Okay, Aaron agrees for the lavender one with 3.5 out of 5. David is looking forward to more cleaning, not the cleaning, but the result. Yes. Giovanni is looking forward to curling. That sounds really fun. I am going to a hockey game on Sunday night, so I will have been up since 3:45 a.m. and then I am going to a hockey game that finishes at 12:30 in the morning, reporting for work. So, RIP my sleep schedule. My brother got me a Team USA pen of Woodstock from Peanuts riding a Zamboni. This knowledge has me ready from the Olympics. I'm very excited for you. I'm looking forward to your daily reviews of the competition. I don't know if I'm going to do daily because there's just so many. By the way, I feel like it's important for you all to know because I do have a rear camera. My name and Michelle Kwan's name are next to each other on the back of this shirt. This is from my time at, and Sasha Cohen's on there too. This is from my time at Ice Castle Training Center. You probably won't be able to see it, but it's in there somewhere. Somewhere deep on it. I don't know where it is on my back. Hockey, like ice skating, only with fighting. Yes, well, this is the women's team, so I'm going there and doing kind of a heated rivalry / Olympics story because women's ice hockey is actually where everybody is married and in relationships with their rivals. And it's a lot gayer than men's hockey. So. Lavender with a side of cilantro, double soap, double fun. That's so interesting where people have that. Amazing. I had Michelle Kwan pictures cut out of my closet door in the 90s. I probably did too. But yes, we trained on the same ice. Very exciting. It was a very small rink, so I did actually get to feel like I trained with her, but except that she was up here and I was down there. But I don't break out t-shirts very often, but I thought I could break this out. Also, I was 13 or 12 when I wore this, and I'm pretty impressed that it still fits me. So it must have been much bigger at that age. All right, y'all. I'm officially late to my union meeting. I hope you all have a lot of fun watching curling, cleaning your house, having the house be clean, possibly my updates from the Olympics. I will do my best to figure out how to at least give it a shot on Patreon. So if you're not already a Patreon member, this is a great opportunity to become one if you are interested in getting my not professional commentary on the Olympics, but I think it could be fun. And until next week, stay safe, stay hydrated, pet a cat if you have one available, and I will see you soon. Bye!